Emergency procurement basically is classified as an emergency procurement if such a procurement helps to mitigate imminent risk or danger to human life and public safety. And such a procurement should not have been foreseen or anticipated, therefore leaving insufficient time to invite competitive bids in line with the procurement system. Now, it is very important to understand at this point that poor planning will not necessarily constitute emergencies. It's something that should not have been anticipated and then taken action to avoid a risk. I also wanted to look at just compare the two terms, emergency and urgent procurement. As I've indicated earlier on, poor planning and execution of the demand planning does not necessarily constitute emergency procurement. So then, what is urgent procurement in this context? Urgent procurement entails the duration of invitation of bids would have a material impact on service delivery, community, public, therefore early delivery is of critical importance. Or as a result from a natural disaster, early delivery is of critical importance. But looking at the emergency on the other hand, it entails that immediate action is required to avoid a dangerous or life-threatening situation, misery or want, and that the invitation of comparative quotations is either impossible or impractical. Now, we have seen this particularly during the COVID-19. No one anticipated it, and all of a sudden, organizations or governments, departments, they tend to acquire their PPE as an emergency because no one anticipated that. So those are some of the typical aspects that you can classify as an emergency. So what is critical here is, do we understand our supply market so that we can avoid going into an emergency which was not necessarily supposed to be? Poor planning does not constitute emergency. So what are then the problems? What are those problems that then will come as a result of buying everything under emergency? Emergency procurement practice may be systemic of a failed procurement system, leading to misprocurement and a bad practice, which in my view, I actually put it as the lastminute.com. Now, what is the problem of the lastminute.com in our environment? It's people wait so that then they can take advantage of the procurement process. And as a result of taking advantage of the procurement process, they blatantly ignore what needs to be done. They blatantly ignore the laid down procurement processes. And that then gives birth to corrupt and unethical practices. So we need to be aware that is the emergency procurement a manipulated process, because it can easily be manipulated. And when it gets manipulated, it means there are a lot of things that come into the picture. We pay too high prices. We don't give all suppliers the level playing ground. The procurement process is actually deliberately ignored by the parties involved. And also some of the things that could have been avoided in the procurement process, or some of the activities that relate to good procurement practice, we are not able to do them because everything now is at the lastminute.com. So it is very important to check the cause for emergency procurement. Is it deliberate? Is there a trend? Because if there's a trend, it means it becomes deliberate. Now, the emergency procurement compromises the procurement best practices. Now, when you look at the procurement best practices, we are looking at having your supply market analysis, advertising the tenders and giving everyone an equal chance to respond to your tenders in line with your procurement process. But because this process has been compromised, all these best practice methodologies are not applied because we are now under pressure to fix a problem. Emergency procurement breeds corruption and unethical practice. Now, I try to look at, or probably to divide corrupt and unethical practice in two scenarios. The first one is that the suppliers are shortchanged, okay? And through that emergency procurement, we end up promoting unethical practice, and you end up promoting modern slavery because we have not applied the proper procurement processes. So unethical practice creeps in. And also it can be used as a conduit for corrupt activities. I think we all saw this during the procurement of the COVID-19 personal protective equipment, or even the drugs themselves. Emergency procurement exposes itself to such risks. Procurement process not designed for emergencies lead to disruptions, costly decisions, and sometimes inappropriate procurement methods. In many cases, if our procurement process was not designed to cater for emergencies, we take decisions that are very expensive in the short, medium, and long term to the organization. And at the same time, it also compromises our procurement methods. If we're supposed to go for an open tender, now we are going for a short RFQ. If we're going to be guided by our spend thresholds, now we are going to ignore all that because we are all under pressure. It is expensive due to rushed procurement decision. As a result, there is no market analysis. There is no price analysis. There is no demand analysis because everything is done hurriedly. So these are some of the pitfalls associated with emergency procurement. Some of the methods or strategies that we can adopt to avoid or overcome the challenges of emergency procurement. Because the reality is we might find ourselves in that space where we need to make an emergency decision. So the first strategy we can actually develop and apply what we call framework or master or panel agreements. Basically what it means, we have one framework agreement, let's say for a period of 3 years, which will cater for those particular items. Should an urgent matter arise, then we only pick the stuff from the suppliers that are on the panel. The second strategy, we can actually use what we call, we create a preferred supplier list. Those suppliers that would have pre-qualified, which is actually an extension of point number 1 in terms of your panel agreements. The third strategy, you can actually devise what we call an emergency procurement deviation procedure with clearly defined process. In the event of an emergency, how are we going to undertake the procurement? What will be the approval levels? And as a result of that, it will then ensure that we plan better and buy better. Number 5, ensure your procurement policy is up to date and it is also reflective of the supply market environment in terms of demand and supply, availability, lead times, and market dynamics. In many cases, we have a procurement policy which is devolved from the environment. Newton was talking just now in part of his introduction that you often have the problems of the pricing going up, or probably disparity between the official exchange rate and the other Bush exchange rate, whatever. I hope I use the right term here. Because our procurement policy does not take into cognizance of such dynamics, it then creates a problem. So what I'm advocating for is, let's also ensure that our procurement policy is lighter on its feet, is streamlined, and is also taking into cognizance the market dynamics in which we operate in. The other point that I also want to share with you is introduce thresholds, spend thresholds for quick turnaround. And this will also help, because you'll be able to analyze and see which of these goods and services that are bought mainly through the emergencies. So you analyze that trend and you devise some spend thresholds based on the trends that we have seen over time. And the next point is, in your procurement process, try to eliminate red tape in the procurement process. Streamline and automate where possible. Because if you automate your procurement process, it actually makes it much easier, and you can actually overcome some of the challenges that we face as a result of emergency. And another aspect that you can also look at is elevate your procurement. Start implementing your strategic sourcing methodologies. Understand which are those items or products or goods and services that are of high risk and high spend. Profile each commodity, and a pattern will show itself. Then from there, start plotting them accordingly using your strategic sourcing methodologies. Out of that, you'll be able to overcome some of the challenges that we have faced as a result of emergencies.